Welcome to the Pacific Wayfinder. This is a special series celebrating the 20th anniversary of RAMSI, the Regional Assistance Mission to Solomon Islands, celebrating our region united. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Solomon Islands descended into civil conflict in a period known as the tensions. The Solomon Islands government asked its Pacific family for help. The Pacific answered the call. The Regional Assistance Mission to Solomon Islands, RAMSI, arrived in peace on July 24, 2003, and departed in friendship on June 30, 2017. Thousands of police, military, and civilian personnel drawn from across the Pacific. 15 contributing countries. 14 years. 7 RAMSI special coordinators. One very special place. Solomon Islands. I'm Akarimon, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Henry Iborature to my left, and Professor Dave Peoples. Hello, Henry. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Aka. Hello, friends and Wantoks. Dave, I believe you are still seeking an unpaid position with Tourism Solomon Islands. What's your main message for today?
Henry, you're right. You're right. I am still seeking an unpaid position with Tourism Solomon. And Henry, I'm a bit surprised they haven't been in contact yet.
And Dave, speaking of Solomon Islands, you returned to Honiara recently to talk story with a few people. Tell us about that.
Yes. It was really wonderful to be back in contact with so many wonderful people in Solomon Islands. And today we have quite a special interview with Johnson Honomai, who is the CEO of the Solomon Islands Broadcasting Corporation. And he shares with us a story that's really honest and really brave. So I think we'll all get something out of that today.
I was actually working here at SIBC on the day of the coup. The then late spokesperson for the Malaita Eagle Force came here that morning. Yeah, I had traveled from my house at the Linkakiki to come to work with my wife in our vehicle. And they stopped me at the then residence of the then Prime Minister, late Ulufalu. This fellow who was all covered up with an M16, balaclava, everything, military style. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, come here, what's happening?" And he said, "You don't know what's happening?" I said, "No, I just came out of my house, I'm going to work." "No, you can't go to work." I said, "Why?" Until today, I didn't know that guy. I mean, I have no idea who I was talking to, but he was a member of the MEF. So from day one of the coup, I was basically caught up. We came here, and the then spokesperson for MEF appeared. And, he wanted to address the nation using radio. But there is a policy here that only the Prime Minister and the Governor General can address the nation through SIBC. We are the national broadcaster. So I said, "No, you can't. You can't address." He had a speech all written up. But hang on, I mean, we've got a leaf hut outside there. So I said, "Just wait for me." I quickly called a management meeting. I said, "Look, we're in this situation." So we agreed to call all the other editors to come here, and we'll suggest to the then spokesperson to have a press conference. We allow him to have his opening statement, and then we can question him. That's the only way that we can allow him to use our broadcasting system here. So he agreed. So I called my other colleagues, newspapers and other radio stations, and they came. We had a great press conference with it. And so I was really, from day one of the coup, I was in it. And then I think a copy of the That press conference is still in our library here. And since then, I've been inside since that day, and then until all these peace talks, Townsville peace agreement, and all the discussions were being held with the leaders around here in Honiara between the Sir Alan Kemakeza and all that stuff. So I was right in the middle of it, and would you believe it? They used to come and members of the MEF used to come and threaten us in our newsroom with M16s. Their members would get drunk and they come in here and threaten us. One day, one of their leaders came and we were having lunch in the lift out here, and he was not very happy with the news item we ran at, during lunchtime, the lunchtime bulletin. The story was that we have confirmed that three MEF members have hijacked a fishing vessel from Noro, actually came up to Honiara. In actual fact, that was a confirmed story. He didn't agree with it, that they were MEF. We referred to them as members of the Malita Eagle Force. People from the groups from Western Province, in actual fact, hired some people from militia from Bougainville to look after their security. So they chased them. The only way of escaping back to Honiara was on this fishing boat. So they hijacked the fishing boat and came up here. So to answer your question, I was basically caught in the middle of, right from the beginning, threats on my life and all this. But with God's grace, I'm still around. But that was, I mean, I wouldn't like to go back to that again, that situation. We would go up to the eastern part of Honiara, trying to get to the other side to speak with the other side, the Gora Canal militia, and they would stop us at the Alligator Bridge, not to allow us. With all M16, I mean, Somalians, you never see M16s, I mean, around the streets and all this. Well, I was here when RAMSI came in, and still there's pictures of women waiting for arrival of the troops, Australian forces, up at the airport, and it was just great excitement. Yeah, and they knew what they were coming for at RAMSI, what they were going to come help bring peace to. I think the legacy that RAMSI had left here. There's a lot of other things, but they basically brought peace to our once happy isles, which was basically destroyed by those two militia groups and all that. So basically restoring peace, and then of course the other mechanisms of government. Yeah, so RAMSI, basically some people, and I agree, was someone's savior with a small s. Yeah, they basically restored order and gave the power back to RSIPF, who basically, the Royal Somaliland Police was basically lost everything. I mean, they couldn't be in charge of the law and order situation. People didn't respect them at all and all that stuff, because, as you remember, some of them took part in sort of on both sides of the two groups. So there was no respect. Stories about the patrol boat being used to bombard, looking for militias on the other side of weather coast of Gora Canal. So basically, RAMSI, if I was going to describe it in a couple of words, basically RAMSI was Solomon Islands' savior. So RAMSI, that's the legacy that I would personally would remember RAMSI for. But as an ordinary Solomon Islander, I mean, I must thank the wisdom of Pacific Islands Forum leaders, not only the then Australian Prime Minister, but all the Pacific Islands Forum leaders, because they came in under the umbrella of the Pacific Islands Forum. And I think that's one of the legacies. If we talk about the legacies of the Pacific Islands Forum, it's the peace, the restoration of peace to Solomon Islands after the situation that we had.
I think that's a story of such courage and bravery, and I really want to thank Johnson for sharing it with us. Thank you, Johnson.
Well, our next guest is Justine Braithwaite, who was the only, let me repeat that, the only female RAMSI Special Coordinator. Welcome, Justine.
Thank you so much, Aka.
I believe you have said Justin is your favorite special coordinator. Is this plain favorites?
Yes, it is, Henry. Yes, it is. I have played favourites. I hope the other RAMSI special coordinators don't mind me saying, but Justine is my special coordinator because we're married. And I'm conscious, Henry, that you did promise romance in this wonderful series, and we're delivering romance today because Justine is my wife, so we're pleased to deliver some romance to our viewers and listeners.
So, Dave, when Justine was Special Coordinator, did you have to salute her and say, yes, ma'am?
Aka, the truth is that I still have to salute Justine and say, yes, ma'am, so that continues even today, so yes.
Is this true, Justine?
Absolutely not.
It's good to know who the boss is.
That's true.
Always.
Justin, you took over as RAMSI Special Coordinator in 2013. What were your key objectives at the outset?
Thank you, Henry. I think let's start with the context. The mission RAMSI had just completed its transition process involving the departure of RAMSI's military component from Solomon Islands and the shift of our economic governance, machinery of government and law and justice programs across to bilateral donors, including the Australian High Commission. So when I came in, the mission looked very different from what it had previously looked like. We were already starting to talk about drawdown and, you know, the mission's eventual departure from Solomons and what that might look like. So when I came into the role, I had 4 key objectives. The first was to negotiate and agree with the Solomon Islands government and the Pacific Islands Forum a blueprint for drawdown, what that would look like, what the timing of it would be, and also to agree upon an extensive program of capacity development for the Royal Solomon Islands Police Force, or the RSIPF. Our job was to provide the best possible training, whether it be in the areas of leadership or providing support with the back-of-house functions for the RSIPF, helping them with their public order management capabilities, mobility, infrastructure, logistics. A second really key element of my tenure, I'd say, as Special Coordinator was the Limited Rearmament Program. You might recall that when RAMSI first came into Solomon Islands in 2003, we had to remove firearms from both the community and the RSIPF, some of whose officers were involved in the tensions. So RAMSI at the time was the only armed entity in Solomons. The RSIPF did not have any weapons. And we were very much aware that for the RSIPF to be an independent and modern professional organisation, it needed to be able to perform its sovereign national security functions. It was a really sensitive policy and a huge shift in mindset away from de-arming the police, if you like, back to providing a very limited, responsible capability. I'd say my third priority was facilitating peaceful national elections In 2014, we knew that it was going to be the next national election for Solomon Islands, and traditionally elections could be a flashpoint for instability or for conflict. We very much wanted the RSIPF to be front and centre in the security operations to facilitate a peaceful, transparent, democratic election process. We wanted RAMSI right at the back and the RSIPF right at the front.
Justine, you spoke about the drawdown, and I wanted to ask if you can speak a little bit more on that, the eventual departure from the Solomons, and what you recall were some of the challenges involved in winding back a mission that had been so incredibly popular.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. RAMSI used to commission a survey called the People's Survey every year, right up until the final years of the mission. And the idea was to obtain a sampling of views from every province, as many villages as we could get to. It was a huge community outreach effort. And one of the answers that came back consistently every year from that survey was that more than 85% of Solomon Islanders supported RAMSI's continued presence in Solomon Islands. Now, obviously that's very flattering and wonderful that people felt a sense of safety and security while RAMSI was there. But our goal was for them to have that same sense of safety and security without RAMSI going into the future, relying on a very modern, professional, responsible and accountable police force. It did mean that we had to mount a really concerted, national level community outreach campaign to explain what the drawdown meant, what was happening, what changes RAMSI was going through, and also, in a way, we wanted to lower RAMSI's footprint and shine a light on the RSIPF's achievements, its successes, and focus less, frankly, on RAMSI and more on national institutions and the capability that the RSIPF now had as one of the best, most professional police forces in the region. The walkabout talks were an absolute highlight. It is such a privilege to be able to visit every province in Solomons. It was such an honour and a privilege to be able to bring RAMSI to the most remote localities, to villages that might not have seen anybody from capital for a very, very long time. We didn't want RAMSI to be standing off in the background expecting people to come to us. We wanted to be out there in communities talking about the issues that mattered. And I had so many highlights from that time. Obviously, we went in listening mode, but we also went to explain what the drawdown was going to look like so that we could reassure people of our confidence in the RSIPF and in Solomon Islands government institutions, that they were absolutely ready and capable of taking back all sovereignty after a considerable period of technical assistance from RAMSI. I really liked grassroots stories. I liked a story with people. I wanted to hear about their lives. I wanted to know about their issues and concerns. And as a result, I found myself in some amazing situations. I remember I attempted to make shell money in Malaita. It was an incredible experience seeing how intricate that work was, the skill that was involved. I got to taste, I think, almost 105 types of bananas in Makira for the Makira Banana Festival. I got to address thousands of women at a Christian conference in the Weather Coast. I got to see the most incredible World Heritage listed nature in Renbel and Bellona Province. I remember I was given a real run for my money in Choiseul during some community consultations. Being a border region, they were particularly interested about the rearmament program. I had to explain the very cautious approach step by step that the Solomon Islands government was going to be taking on. And I got to do other things like open police stations in Isabel, Western and Central Province. I managed to deliver an awful lot of assets, boats, vehicles to many other police stations around the place. So it was incredible privilege. I was so lucky to have had that opportunity, and I would go back any moment in time. If I could go back and fly over that beautiful country again, I would do so in a heartbeat.
Justine, let's talk more about women. You formed close relationships with women in the community and officers of the Royal Solomon Islands Police Force while grappling with the issue of gender-based violence. Tell us more about that.
As a woman, I approached the security situation in Solomons with a different lens. I think for many, many years before I came into the position, the mission had necessarily to focus on public order management, on maintaining security operations, managing civil disobedience. I wanted to continue doing all of that, but I also wanted to perhaps use my voice to address the issue of family violence within homes, to address violence against women, gender-based violence, family violence in general. So in my view, Solomon Islands could only be as secure as people in their homes were secure. You can't be feeling safe within your community, within your village, within your city, within your country, if you're not safe within the home. And so I didn't want, during my tenure for domestic violence, to be a private conversation. I wanted it to be a public conversation. I wanted everyone to be a part in discussions on how to prevent this because, as far as I could see, it really required every entity, every organisation, every person in the community to address properly what was going on in Solomons. I really, really enjoyed working particularly with female Royal Solomon Islands Police Force officers because they understood very well what was going on. They were really tapped into their communities. I really wanted to have a public education campaign so that people understood domestic violence wasn't a private matter. It was a crime, a very serious crime under the new Family Protection Act laws that the Solomon Islands government had enacted. And so we were out there almost every week. We were on the radio talking with the SIBC. We were talking about family violence related issues in communities. I went to women's organisations, I went to schools, I went to churches. We really did travel all over with the magnificent community policing team.
Justine, can I ask, what was it like working with staff and police officers who were drawn from all across the Pacific?
We often talk about RAMSI's strengths, and one of its key strengths was its regional character. And nowhere did you see that more than at the RAMSI base, where at any given time we'd have police officers and other staff from all 15 Pacific Island countries serving as part of the RAMSI contingent. One of the lovely things about working in a regional mission was having the opportunity to meet all these incredible people from around the Pacific. And if I can give you a little bit of a flavour of what it was like working and living on the RAMSI base up near the airport in Honiara, there would always be music playing somewhere. Someone would crack out a guitar or form a choir. There was always people doing island dancing down on the waterfront. We would have sports competitions, basketball games, volleyball. RAMSI created friendships and relationships across the entire region that I think we can be really proud of now.
And what do you miss most about Solomon Islands?
I would say, first and foremost, the people, working with the people of Solomon Islands, getting to hear their views. My staff within the office who were from all around the place. We had a a New Zealand Deputy Special Coordinator. We had a Fijian Assistant Special Coordinator. We had wonderful staff from the Solomons and from Australia, of course. So I'd say the people in communities that we talked with, as well as the people in my own office, who were all frankly incredible. I think also the rewarding nature of the work, you really felt that you were part of something bigger than any one person. It was a team that was united across the country that worked hand in glove with Solomon Islands government. It was a place where you felt you could make a difference every day. RAMSI was unique, Solomons is unique, and together they were just a partnership, a powerhouse. It was incredible to be a part of it.
Justin, you mentioned a very special person, a Fijian, by the name of Masi Loma Loma, who was, as you said, the Assistant Special Coordinator, who unfortunately passed away. Are you able to share with us some of your memories and reflections on working with Masi?
Masi was just such a special human being. He, I understand, arrived in RAMSI way back in 2005. So we're talking really early days of the mission. And he stayed as Assistant Special Coordinator all the way through, right up until the mission's closure in 2017. And when I think of Masi, I think of him being just the quintessential gentleman's gentleman. He came from a military background. So he always used to make a point of saying to people, I'm not a diplomat, but actually he was the most formidable, the best diplomat of anyone I'd ever met. And that's just because of his commitment to the issues that he was working on, to the people of Solomon Islands. Masi, for many people, was the face of the mission because they saw him around. He was everywhere. He was always out talking to communities or involved in reconciliation processes that were so important. Masi was, the heart of the mission in many ways, and I miss him terribly. He alone was responsible for so many of the mission's successes. And I should mention most particularly his work on facilitating some very key reconciliations that arose out of the tensions period. That brought a sense of peace to people who had lost, very dear loved ones. Masi was absolutely determined to make sure that those reconciliations were completed and done properly so that all voices could be heard, and he was just brilliant at it. So I was really, really lucky to have been able to work with him for the 4 years that I was in Solomons.
Reconciliation is the process that they do in order to get people that were involved in the conflicts, to come together and reconcile again. And it is a part and parcel of their life, and that is why it is a major challenge for them, for them to progress from where they are at the moment. That it's important that reconciliation should be done. To us, it is a issue that needs to be done initiated by the people of Solomon Islands, but we are providing the environment for it.
RAMSI, as we know, is not here to do everything. The specific thing that RAMSI came to do is to restore law and order. People might have other thoughts about it, but generally I think RAMSI has restored law and order.
Well, our next guest is Dr. Jonathan Austin, who manages the Pacific Regional Division at New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He has held many senior diplomatic positions, and he is a former RAMSI Deputy Special Coordinator. I believe he has also looked after Dave on his birthday when they were in Indonesia together.
True.
And so welcome, Jonathan, and thank you for looking after Dave.
Jonathan, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today. You were the Deputy Special Coordinator in an early phase of RAMSI. Could you tell us about some of your personal highlights from your time in Solomon Islands?
Dave, good to see you again. A good friend from Solomons and from Indonesia too. So nice to connect today. And I think when people think of the Solomon Islands and when that name comes to mind, they often think of some of the challenges that the country has had, but often overlooked is the really friendly people and the incredible natural landscape actually of the Solomons. So for us that was a real highlight. But perhaps the personal highlight for us was the ability for us as a family to reconnect with our Solomon Island Wontoks. My wife, Salote, is from Tonga, and her grandmother was in fact born in Munda. So this was the first time that anyone from the Tongan side of the family had been able to come back to Solomons and meet all our Wontoks, especially out west. So meeting them, I guess, was perhaps the biggest highlight for us.
I hadn't realised that family connection, Jonathan. So that's really quite special. Thank you for sharing. Could you tell us what it was like working alongside police, military, and civilian personnel from all across the Pacific?
Well, I think that was one of RAMSI's biggest strengths, that it drew from all the Pacific Island Forum members. Of course, Australia was a very generous funder, and the special coordinator was Australian. Many great Australians worked in the mission. But what made RAMSI so special and so unique was that every single Forum Island or every Forum member had participants in the mission. But that was particularly true for the police, where at one point we had police officers from everywhere in the Pacific. But the fact that all of these people from around the Pacific, our whole Pacific whānau, was there, really gave meaning to the mission's motto that it was help him friend, because o get a lo Pacific, come lo solo, or help him or get a friend below him. So that was just one of the great things about it for me.
No, thanks, Jonathan. And can you tell us what it was like being out and about in the Solomon Islands communities over that period?
Well, getting out and about was perhaps the highlight for me, but the rest of the Solomons, just extraordinary landscapes, amazing people. So whether it was by boat or driving or helicopter or plane or however we got out there, that was a real plus. And it was a reminder, I guess, of the incredible diversity of the Solomons too. No two places are the same. People are different, languages are different. And I think, meeting people, understanding what their problems were, what their challenges were, what we could do to help was really special. We often, I think, people expected RAMSI to be able to do even more. We had to explain, we're not the government. We're there to help the government. And we made a point of taking the government with us so that they could also talk to the people when they got out and about. We had a public outreach team that did a brilliant job. But it was always just so refreshing to meet ordinary Solomon Islanders and to see how RAMSI was making a difference to their lives.
Thanks, Jonathan. New Zealand was a major contributor and supporter throughout the life of RAMSI. Why do you think successive New Zealand governments showed that strong commitment to regional security cooperation there?
Well, New Zealand's been a long-standing friend and supporter of the Solomon Islands. So when the Solomons made a plea for help, then of course we were going to go and help them. I think we've also for a long time taken the view that the region can provide for its own security needs. So when one of the countries in the region has a security challenge, then it's good for the rest of us in the region, including New Zealand, to be part of it and to work together to help a member of the Pacific family. And of course, RAMSI was a prime example of exactly that. And then the other reason for New Zealand participation, of course, is that our ally Australia was there, and pretty much every major world event or deployment, New Zealand and Australia have been there side by side, and being side by side in the Solomons was another great example of the ANZAC collaboration.
So much excitement. And I did promise romance in this series. And I believe, delivered. Yes. Do not miss our action-packed, excitement-packed, romance-packed final episode where we will bring it all home. This will be even bigger than the most recent Fast and Furious movie.
Well, thank you, Henry, and thank you, Dave. And thank you to all our viewers and listeners. We'll see you next time on this special series of Pacific Wayfinder, celebrating the 20th anniversary of RAMSI, celebrating our region united.